Pause a minute for today. Wash your hand clean and pray. Global epidemic day. Corona, people dying every day. Corona, it be virus. Mania, funny serious. Corona, a virus. A chewa, we go lost. Pause a minute for today. Wash your hand clean and pray. Global epidemic day. Corona, people dying every day. Corona, it be virus. Mania, funny serious. Corona, a virus. A chewa, we go lost. Bang, bang, bang. Pause a minute for today. Wash your hand clean and pray. Global epidemic day. Corona, people dying every day. Corona, it be virus. Mania, funny serious. Corona, a virus. A chewa, we go lost.
Purchase your track now.
Wash your hand daily with running water and don't stop. Keep away from non-farm meetings and do something, bro. Pray for your enemy, pray for your family, pray for your country, yeah. Don't forget to keep clean with hand sanitizer.
BENSON.
Pause a minute for today. Wash your hand clean and pray. Global epidemic day. Corona, people dying every day. Corona, it be virus. Mania, funny serious. Corona, a virus. A chewa, we go lost. China, Japan, man down. Italy, UK, man down. United States locked down. What now? Pause a minute for today. Wash your hand clean and pray. Global epidemic day. Corona, people dying every day. Corona, it be virus. Mania, funny serious. Corona, a virus. A chewa, we go lost. Pause a minute for today. Wash your hand clean and pray. Global epidemic day. Corona, people dying every day. Corona, it be virus. Mania, funny serious. Corona, a virus. A chewa, we go lost.
Welcome to the show. This is the Progressive Minds. Sorry for that little technical glitch. We're live tonight, and we are glad you are here with us. This is where we build our community. It is the Progressive Mind Show. We are located right here in the city, beautiful city. I have to qualify that beautiful city of Chicago. And today is January 13th, 2021. I was going to say 2020 because we've been saying that for a whole year. 2021, but it doesn't even really actually feel like a new year because new year, but same style, same vibe, same feeling. And politically, the cloud looks a little gloomy because of everything that is going on. So this evening, we are glad to be coming away with two outstanding guests in our community who would help us, who will be helping us understand and probably break down what is going on in the United States of America. The beacon of democracy at the Capitol Hill, tensions are very high, very, very unfortunate times for the U.S. And so we're hoping that this evening we'll be able to digress some of the issues. We're encouraging you, our audience, to join in, as this is a platform where we build our community by engaging you and I. So this is not just us, but we're encouraging you to chime in the conversation with your comments, with your questions. You can call in. I'll give you the numbers, or you can comment on Facebook. We're live on Facebook and YouTube. So both ways you can comment or ask questions. We're also live on MyStar Radio, which is an online radio station, a Pan-African online radio station in Washington, D.C. It is, again, a minute past 6 p.m., and we are glad that you have joined us. This evening, we will go straight. Captain Mike is not able to join us today, as you are accustomed to, so we will not have the Captain Mike segment. So we will be going straight to our guest for the discussion this evening. Without wasting any time, let me try and see if we can get John here. Okay, so my guests are here, and we'll try and do this. But then we don't have to. Okay, let's not jump this session. Very, very important. We'll take this short break. When we come back, we'll take the verse of the day and then talk to our guests. Please stay with us. Share the feed while we take this short break so that your friends and our friends can participate in tonight's discussion. We shall be right back. And here. Well, you're welcome. Today's verse of the day, would like to take it from the good old Psalm. I'd like to take both of my verses from my inspirations from the book of Psalm. Very, very powerful book, I believe. It is from Psalm 135, verses 13. Today is the 13th of January, 2021. So I chose this for a purpose. Verse 13 says, "Your name, O Lord, endures forever. Your name, O Lord." I'll take it again. "Your name, O Lord, endures forever. You're renowned, O Lord, through all generations. For the Lord will vindicate." 14 says, "For the Lord will vindicate his people and have compassion on his servants." That would be for that. And go straight to our audience. I have John Benson, who is an attorney at law. John Benson is attorney at law. As I said, he practices civil law, criminal defense, general litigation, and some DCFS cases. Attorney Benson is no stranger on this show. We've had he's been on the show before, and we have interacted based off some community issues. And so I'm glad that he made time to come on the show today to help with this conversation. Attorney Benson, you're welcome again to the Progressive Mind Show.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
My pleasure. Next to him is Ted Williams, who is not a stranger as well on this show. He is the head of political science faculty at City of Chicago Colleges, precisely Kennedy King College. Ted Williams is a social commentator. I'm sure you've seen him on Facebook. He does some of these things that he's talking about. He says a lot of them on his platform. Great guy in our community, Ted Williams. My pleasure. Ted Williams III. I have to add that. My pleasure. Pleasure having you again. And I'll be looking forward to a great convo. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And then here we have my brother, Nana AFRIFA. He is a political analyst specialized in geopolitics, African politics, international relations. Nana, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So this evening we want to look at happenings at the Capitol Hill. So for those of you watching us, I'm sure you've seen the flyer on social media. Home of the brave, right? Is what we chose for today's discussion. Now, why is America called the home of the brave? And I'd like Ted and John, Attorney Benson, to probably break this down for us, because I always use myself as an example. One of the reasons why I came to America is all the stories, all the good things we hear about America, in terms of America being world police, America being the beacon of democracy, which a lot of people like to emulate. A lot of countries around the world like to emulate. And so when we hear the land of the free and brave, and we hear all those things, and we aspire, and we wonder what makes these people so great, what makes this land so great. And then when you come in, you go through the experiences, sometimes as an immigrant, because everything you have to deal with, you are clouded with, your day-to-day and issues going on in your own community. So we don't necessarily, dive into why this country is great, or what makes this country what it is, and the talk of, what it is, and why people talk so much about it, right? But when things like this, when things like the issue going on at the Capitol Hill happens, then it begins to dawn on you. It begins to give you a different perspective as to some of the things that you hear about America, right? The home of the brave. Why is it? And then why are we seeing what we're seeing? So without much ado, Attorney Benson, why is America known or called the home of the brave?
Well, I guess I really don't know. It comes from a poem.
Okay.
Brave sounds good, so let's just call ourselves brave.
Okay, Ted, I don't know. It's in the national. It's in the anthem, right? What you hear it, the land of the brave, the home of the brave. Can you help us understand why it's been termed this way? Why America's known or termed the home of brave, the home of the brave? Sorry.
So I will go back to some of the founding fathers and some of the principles by which the country was founded on, right? And we know these principles, I'll say this with this disclaimer, when these principles were exercised hypocritically very much throughout our history, and yet on paper they were still very clear and very right, I believe, in certain ways. And so it really starts in 1620 with the Mayflower Compact. And this idea that the Pilgrims were coming really for the goal of advancing their Christian faith, honoring the king and the country, and actually honoring their God as well, which was the three-part goal of the Mayflower Compact. And so as they were writing back to England, to King James specifically, they were making the point that this place they were going was designed to start a new movement, if you will, a new place of freedom, an expansion, really, in many ways, of God's kingdom. And this was theologically very heavily in the sort of beginning documents. If you look at both the Pilgrims and the Puritans, much of their genesis was surrounding faith and the need for faith engaged in the political process and the social life, so that we would not have to create a society of having a multiplicity of laws, that sort of thing. We'd be based on freedom. But that freedom, as George Washington said in his 1796 farewell address, that freedom would be tied very heavily to religion and morality, because without religion and morality, you would not have the ability for people to be self-governing and self-exercising. John Adams, the second president, said that this country, the Constitution, was made for moral and religious people. For the governance of any other, it is wholly inadequate. And so there was this idea of freedom encouched in this notion of sort of self-governing, connected to this idea of a higher being. And as you look at the Declaration of Independence, written in 1776, Thomas Jefferson took a lot of his principles from the English philosopher John Locke, who also wrote about natural rights and those rights coming specifically from God, and that those rights then of a government that was powerful enough to give us rights would consequently be powerful enough to take those rights away. And so this was the self-governing experiment in America. And so in many ways, that freedom has been America's greatest strength. And yet it has also been America's Achilles heel. It has also been America's most glaring hypocrisy. And also, I would argue in 2020, it might be America's biggest potential downfall and liability, because freedom is idolized in this country, so much so that if you say to the country, we need you to restrict your freedom just slightly, i.e. wear a mask, i.e. shut down some businesses, just slightly, for the protection of the public good, would you do that? And because we idolize freedom so heavily in this country, many Americans would rather die than give up their freedom. And that, my friend, I think is a real tragedy. So in many ways, our greatest strength might ultimately be the thing that brings us down in the end.
Wow. Attorney Benson, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to what he said. Great.
No, I agree with what he says. The only thing I don't think it's true freedom not to wear a mask. I mean, I think that's just ridiculous. I think a lot of these people who aren't wearing masks, they just don't believe in science. They don't believe in the spread of the virus. That's nonsense freedom, to tell you the truth. It's not freedom. It's just doing selfish acts in order to do selfish acts. It's a rejection of science.
Yeah. And I would agree with you on that. You know, I fully would agree with you on that. I think it has been a misinterpretation. Freedom. In the same way, so many other issues, healthcare, gun control, that sort of thing. People idolize freedom to the point where, once again, they're unwilling to engage in right civil policy for the betterment of everyone else. And I think that is a real tragedy.
But you know what, if I could spin it a little bit or take it a little bit, you know, there's been a rejection of science in our society for a long time, which is really quite stunning because we are such a technologically and scientifically advanced society, yet there is still a rejection of science. And I think that's purposeful. I mean, I think it comes from, you know, the cigarette industry denied medical science. Smoking doesn't hurt you. That was a concerted effort to deny science. The fossil fuel industry has a concerted effort to deny science. So it's not an accident that there's a lot of people out there who don't believe in science. They've been taught not to believe in science by people with vested interests.
So I don't know if Bernard wanted to chime in on this. If not, I would like to just have a follow-up question for Ted and John.
No.
Okay. So I wanted to have. So are we saying that? I mean, is it that our quest for freedom and overrides, you know, our ability to look at things objectively, you know, through the eyes of science and technology? Is that what Ted, you were talking about?
I mean, I would fully agree with John that we do have rejection of science. In some ways, you know, I'm a person of faith. I'm ashamed to say that in some ways, you know, faith has been, you know, the impetus behind this rejection of science.
I agree.
Right? And so, you know, I think it's a problem, right? I believe in faith and good science, right? But I think the other thing is that I think we have a diametrically opposed ideological sort of battle. It's happening, two diametrically opposed ideologies and goals for our society. Think about this. And I don't know if this is really, this experiment in America, I don't know if we realize how difficult it is. We want to be a society that is fully free, and also we also push equality, right? Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, among those of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, freedom and equality don't always mix. There are times when your freedom will impact our ability to move towards equality. And there are times where our goals for equality will impact someone's ability to be fully free. And so I think what we have is really a crisis, right? An identity crisis in many ways, Are we going to be fully free, or are we going to be an equal society? And I think you see that played out in the two ideologies, politically and otherwise. I would venture to say, personally, I would promote the idea of equality a little more than just freedom for freedom's sake. But I will say that unless we make sacrifices for one another, and we realize, as Dr. King said, that you cannot have a first-class nation with second-class citizens, that we really are all inextricably linked, right, together. Unless we realize that, not only it won't be the corona, if it's not the coronavirus that destroys us, it'll be gun violence that destroys us. If it's not that, it'll be lack of healthcare that destroys us. If it's not that, it's the rampant inequality. I mean, all the way along the line, many of our political issues are really tied to this idea that we, and as John said, the selfishness that is tied to this false notion of freedom, I think really is a problem in our culture.
Ted, isn't America already free? Why? Yeah. Why is it why is there still the drive to fight for freedom? What are we fighting? Why are we fighting for so much freedom? Because I think America is already free, and so what is the drive for freedom? And because I'm hearing this, and it looks like the country is divided between those who are fighting for freedom and we want our country back, America has to be great again, and those who are pushing for equality. And so there is that divide. But why is this not so much push for freedom? I thought we thought America is already free.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll say this quickly. I'll let John hop in on this, but I just think that we have a false communication, a notion that very simple measures to bring people, say, healthcare, or bring people some level of sustenance in our society are efforts to move us towards a socialistic or communistic society where there is no freedom. This has played so well in the American story, really for 100 years, right? Well, close to 100 years, even since you can look at 1945, the beginning of the Cold War. And you could make the argument that Americans who are, right-leaning particularly, look at healthcare as socialism. They look at welfare programs as socialism. They look at any effort to take away their guns as tyranny. And these things are illogical, absolutely positively illogical. By their definition, the government shouldn't do anything. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, roads, public housing, all of these things by many of the right-wing ideological points would ultimately be socialist, and we should have none of them. And so we should really be living according to them in a Darwinian society in which the rich survive, the poor die, survival of the fittest. And so I just think it's a lie. And that's all it is. We are free. And this idea that our freedom is threatened by particularly what's happening right now in the country is a lie. And as we saw on Wednesday, it's a very dangerous lie that has ended with people dying and will continue to do so if we don't address it.
I think that Ted, you made. There's a reason why I wanted us to get deep into. Get to the background and have some understanding of where why we're seeing all that we're seeing. Again, a lot of us we watch it on CNN, but we have to have. It's good to have an understanding, have a background understanding of why this is stemming up, why this is coming up now. We want to talk about the premise of what we saw at the Capitol Hill last week is based off of what a part of some people in America think was a stolen verdict from their perspective. Oh, go ahead, John.
No, I'll jump on that one. No, I mean, you basically, it was a bunch of white supremacists who have been around for a long time. They've been around. They have an agenda. They are white nationalists, white racists, and Donald Trump has brought them together and given them legitimacy. There was no stolen election. The elections were free. The elections were fair, and they are brought together and given legitimacy by a president who has made a history of racism. When he was in New York as a real estate developer, he called for the death penalty on those young boys who were falsely accused of raping a jogger. Those young boys spent some 30 years in prison for a crime they didn't do. He demanded the death penalty. He rattled his sword, and when it turned out that those boys, then men, were proved innocent, he just shut up. He didn't say anything. So he's got a history of race baiting. He's got a history of the press. He wants to build a wall. I'm sorry. Nationalism is racism with another name. That's what it's all about.
So what would you say to some people who legitimately, and then maybe Bernard, you can respond to this, even including some Africans, when we saw some of the pictures, some of the images that were popping up on mainstream media, you know, of course, there were some Africans there. But anyway, how would you want to respond to folks within the African community and probably the general community that have a legitimate belief? Because to date, I talked to some people and they say, you don't know, you didn't know what's going on. This elections was rigged. And what would you want to say to those people, Nana?
Well, looking at it from outside, I think the forces that have come together to explode right in our midst is kind of complex. We're looking at religious forces. We're looking at oligarchic forces. Then we're looking at the international stage too. We're looking at other forces that is putting pressure on the United States. So if you look at the world right now, I mean, you can trace back to 1945, you know, with the Soviet Union coming into play and the Cold War, and the Soviet Union leaving the scene for the US to be pretty much the dominant power of the world. Then as this is played out, it looks like the US really didn't, how should I put it, didn't really exploit the vacuum that came out with the collapse of the Soviet Union. So if you look at this, while there's a lot of nationalistic racism, which is the core of this movement, one could also look at it from the point that most of these people come from areas in America today where the economic welfare is really bad. I mean, if you look at the Midwest, if you look at the areas that Trump won massively, if you ever drive through America, you see these are areas where people are not living as they used to be. Now, when you have this situation, you can have anybody come around, right, and point fingers at somebody else. Oh, it's the immigrants, it's the blacks, okay, who are causing you this misery. And I think this has crystallized into what I think the media is not really saying, into a fascist movement. And fascism is a very tricky movement, because while it entails some populism, right, it also misuses freedom as a way to push its own agenda of a very myopic nationalistic view. Okay, so when we come back to, I mean, it was so troubling for me. You know, a lot of people don't talk about it, but Trump won more black votes, right, than he did when he ran against Hillary. Now, why is this so? How, as a person who's been openly racist, who's openly disrespected people of color, still get a lot of people to vote for him? A lot of people, relatively more people in the particular group, to vote for him than 4 years ago.
Okay.
And I would say it's the misinformation. It's the misinformation, because Trump is a lot of things to a lot of people. Now, when you see these people in Nigeria, on the streets. And it's so embarrassing, right? I mean, coming from a continent where he uses it's a word I can't even use online, right? Against such a continent. And surprisingly, you had some of these same people come around and defend him.
Exactly. So my question is, why though?
Because it's misinformation. And when people are not so well informed about not necessarily America, but the world, America doesn't live in a vacuum. We need to understand these are pieces going around. Okay? These the Trump camp know very well, using the churches, know very well they can use issues that people are fanatically attached to, like homosexuality, and some of these issues that people don't really
immigration,
right? That people don't even realize in the Bible, right? It's not even clear cut as they think it is.
Okay.
So, but then there are a bunch of demagogues in these among these groups who keep on leading them astray. Okay.
Because let me interject a little bit, because what you're saying, being an African, I hear it all the time. There is so much support for Trump within the African community. It sometimes baffles me, and sometimes the argument for him, and to the extent people literally believe that the latest elections were stolen from him. And I'm not talking about I'm talking about intellectual people. Very, very highly intellectual people who sincerely believe that this election was stolen. And sometimes I ask, why do you think so? Why do you think
I don't really see them as intellectual.
No, but well, these are people who have serious academic backgrounds. But what I'm saying is that, apart from when we have conversations regarding this elections and Trump and all of that, we have a very open, a positive, constructive argument. But when it comes to Trump and these elections, they sincerely believe that it was stolen from him. And like you said, you made certain points, which that's very true. Trump has said a lot of things about Africans. He has taken, he's actually scrapped chain immigration he's done a lot of immigrations. A lot of his immigration policy actually does not favor Africans. Again, coupled with the fact that he talks ill about Africans, degrades Africans. I mean, the whole continent talks ill about us and does not respect the continent of Africa, and more so Black people. He says it on TV and a lot of places. Why is it that there's so much support still for him? I think it's because of religion, right? Because
I don't think there's so much support for him. They're just louder. Okay, when you go among, I mean, I've argued with a lot of people. They don't make sense. They don't come out with evidence. Okay, they just loud. Okay, they come out they pick up what they call half truth, right? They try to make them to be truths, right? If you ask them what evidence is there that the elections were stolen from Trump, they can't even come up with any evidence.
Right?
They will come up with conspiracy theories, right? They could come out with a whole lot of things, the same arguments. I mean, a stronger argument could have been made when Trump won against Hillary than Trump is making against Biden. I mean, actually, so if you look at it that way, I don't really. So most of these people are, I would say, they are cynics. Okay, and you have cynics amongst every society.
Right, I agree.
Okay?
And I think that they are cynics, and I think that it's due to serious religious belief. Again, Trump has done very well in, I'll say, cajoling the evangelicals or the Christendom as a person of faith or a person that supports the Christian values, right? And as a result, I think a lot of Christians get drawn to him regardless of anything that he does. Oh, he is for us. His policies help Christians. His policies propagate or promote, Christian values, and he's done this for Israel and all of that. So I think that sometimes, and I feel their sincere belief that because he's for us, regardless of his, anything else that he does, this man's for us and we are for him. And so we want him to be president, and we want him to continue being the leader of this country, because when he is there, he's going to stop a lot of some negative agenda that Christians think that, this world is turning into. And so I think that there is some legitimacy to their belief, because that is their faith. But I think that is what plays into their support for Trump. But sometimes you ask yourself, do you always want to take, prioritize your religion over, just good values in life? So that is the confusion. That's the dichotomy. And I think, Ted, you talked about this the other time when we were on the show. Help us understand why Christians draw. We understand why they draw to them, but can we find a balance to common sense and faith?
So I would, I love to look at historic trends and that sort of thing. And what you've got to understand is we are really bearing the fruit of the moral majority movement of the early 1980s, where the evangelical community attached itself to the candidate Ronald Reagan and the President Ronald Reagan. And very easily in their communication attached Christianity to three simple issues: immigration, abortion, and issues of sexuality. Mm-hmm. And, it's interesting because as someone who studied and study politics as much, those three issues, while I believe there is biblical precedent for some of the positions they have on them, are in many ways really a drop in the bucket compared to what scriptures talk about when they talk about immigration, when the scriptures talk about injustice and inequality, when the scriptures talk about the favoritism of the rich. And so you had literally bad theology that was really pushed, I would say, for a generation, that suggested to people that people in the faith communities that the power, if you will, in the political process, the stance of God is really about these particular few issues, and the rest of the issues do not matter. We live in an imperfect two-party system, and so people have to choose, right? It's like picking a cable package. You don't get all the channels that you want. You have to pick some channels that you don't want. Mm-hmm. And I think that they've been very effective in this communication. Also, I think what John said is very true. Christianity in America, historically as well, has been tied to white nationalism. Even what I mentioned when I mentioned the Founding Fathers and the Mayflower Compact, this is all part of this theological story that comes from the evangelical church, that not only is this a place that God has made separate and special, but also in some ways that America is the sort of reincarnation or a continuation, if you will, of the Israelite community. That we are God's chosen people in some way, this notion of American exceptionalism. And so that American exceptionalism that was really pushed theologically, really influenced the ideological positions of many movements in this country, and has led to the support for all kinds of atrocities that the military, the U.S. military, has done around the world. Really look at our role in colonization in various places around the world. And so all that stuff, you got to really unpack it. I love having conversations like this, because on cable TV, we don't get to have this, right? We get to talk about the issues and the position. We don't get to talk about why we're here. Mm-hmm. And so that's really what it is. It's bad theology. And so people have to wake up and understand that. Right theology, I believe, prioritizes the issues of the marginalized. Not to get overly theological here, but in Matthew 25, the scriptures talk about, our judgment will very heavily be based on how we treated the least of these in our society. Mm-hmm. And so I don't see how people can go through the scriptures. And I talk to a lot of folks who are on the other side of these issues as well, and I hear them talking about these things. But it's very difficult for me to understand how they can ignore those large passages there. And I really think that the tradition of Dr. King and the tradition of the civil rights movement, to me, is the best part of the faith community, right? And so I work in secular environments, secular institutions. I make the argument that, at least in those spaces, we have the kind of faith that pushes progressivism, the kind of faith that pushes equality, the kind of faith that pushes justice, And to me, that is the kind of faith that has to happen. And I will say very clearly, if people who are in those communities don't begin teaching those kinds of things, then the next generation will not make the changes that need to be made, that we're seeing very clearly need to be made in our culture.
John, thank you so much, Ted, for breaking it down. And Nanea, I think you made excellent points as well. I don't know if John wanted to chime in on that.
Sure. I agree with Mr. Williams, but I'll say it this way: another word for biology, and that's heresy. I am not a particularly religious person. I have read the Bible cover to cover multiple times. When I listen to the evangelical Christians, I actually think of heretics. They have no relationship with anything I have seen in the Bible. If you read the New Testament, it is a very confusing document. But one thing you take away, Jesus was concerned about the poor. Jesus was concerned about the least among us. I don't really know what else he was concerned about other than love of God. But how can you be so opposed to abortion, yet at the same time tolerate separating children from their parents at the border? You can't pick and choose certain things. You have to take the package. And the package of Donald Trump, and Republicans have a moral problem right now, and they've had a moral problem for some time. The abortion is as complex as it gets. However, and you will never, ever, ever eliminate abortion. But with fair distribution of resources, with proper education, good health care, you could so diminish abortion to the point where it's really a minor issue. So I actually find a lot of the evangelical Christians to be heretics, to tell you the truth.
Wow. I don't. Bernard, I don't know if you wanted to contribute to this, but if not, I just want to recognize. Okay.
Hey, Santa, let me just say real quickly on top of that, and I appreciate John way even further than I do, which I appreciate. What I will say as well, you got to look at the coalition that supported Donald Trump. You've got evangelicals, as John said. You've got disaffected white voters, as Bernard said. But then what we probably are missing are really the pure capitalists among us, who look at the political process as just a way to ultimately make more money, to have greater tax breaks, et cetera, et cetera. I want to share just a quick couple, 2-3 statistics real quickly that I think help us understand where we are. In the 1950s, the corporations in this country represented over 30% of all federal tax revenue that came in. So of all the tax money that came in, corporations paid essentially just over a third of it. Just this last year, the corporate share of federal tax revenues now is at 6%. It's at 6%. And that's because we've had decades of tax policies that have told corporations that they don't need to pay taxes. Not to single any out here, but I'll say Amazon, multi-billion-dollar corporation. Many of us use Amazon. I use Amazon myself, and yet Amazon does not pay a red cent in taxes, and is responsible really for the closing of just about 30% of all retail stores in the last decade in this country. So as we have a society where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, right? When we look at the top 400 Americans in this country have as much wealth as the bottom 60% of the country. And the average corporate CEO in 1965 made 24 times what their workers make, and now they make over 200 times what their workers make. We are really, really moving to a society of the haves and have-nots. And those folks that are benefiting, that are profiting from the pandemic, that are profiting during times of crisis, that are doing very well economically and have never stopped. They love Donald Trump, right? Many people said, well, he's horrible, but the stock market is good. How many people have stock, right? Many people who are marginalized, the stock market being good means absolutely nothing to them. But for those at the top Donald Trump is really their man. And so it's very easy to say, and I know plenty of people who have morals and this sort of thing, but then they go, man, well, Trump is good for my pocketbook. And they're willing to look past all of these other things so that they can have the almighty dollar. And I want to make sure that we throw that into the mix too, because America's one of its other sins, and Dr. King talked about this very heavily, is that if we are more concerned with profit than we are with people, this country does not have a long future.
Well, on that note, I would like to take a short break. When we come back, the discussion on the home of the brave, the way forward continues. You have been watching the Progressive Mind Show. We're live on Facebook and YouTube, also being carried live on Trend Africa TV, My Star Radio in Washington, D.C. It's an online Pan-African radio station for the discerning listener. We have Lara, Lala, and Doom watching us. Rebecca is on the show. We also have Noble Chadris joining us on the show. Bernard KK Botte is also here. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll be talking to my guest this evening is John Benson, Attorney John Benson, Bernard Nanaya Free, Bernard Ted Williams III. As we look at Home of the Brave, we will be diving into the riots, the demonstration riots, whatever you want to call it, coup d'etat. We would like to look at all of that when we come back from the short break. Stay tuned. This is the Progressive Mind Show.
Check out this beautifully made artistry of coffee tables made from a combination of recycled tires, jute ropes, wood, and fabric to suit your style. Yes, we make to order. These coffee tables can help you make a statement in your bedrooms, offices, and living rooms. But remember, we only ship within the USA and Canada after shipping cost is paid. Call Jasper Designs on 1-306-203-2650 or email us at doduyayra@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram at Jasper Love or follow Pearl Yara Agboka on Facebook. Don't be left out. Please place your orders now.
Welcome back. This is the Progressive Mind Show. I am your host, Sena, aka Alinko. This is where we build our community by engaging you and I in dialogues that are aimed to helping us shape our minds regarding some of these issues that we're talking about this evening. We're talking about Home of the Brave, the way forward. How is America looking right now in the eyes of the international community? The place that the place they call the people's house, the place that across the globe you would, if you were having a crisis in your democracy or your democratic process as a nation or as a society, one of the main places, if not the only place you would want to call after UN or you want to call or get support or assistance from after the UN is the United States, right? We look up to it so much. But after seeing what we saw last week, it kind of shook us. It shook a lot of people and even Americans. Some Americans are for it, others are not. But I know that majority do not like what they saw. They're saying that it's an insurrection. It's people were saying, yes, people have the right to protest. Were they protesting? Was it a coup d'etat? What was it? This moment, we would like to dive into some of the nitty-gritties, the terminologies, the implications, and all of that. It's 6:44 p.m. Here in the studios of Progressive Minds. If you're watching us on Facebook and YouTube, I encourage you to share the feed. That is how we can engage the community in this discussion. So far, we've been enjoying the information. We've been taking in the information from my guest. The number to ring in if you want to ask a question or share an opinion is 815-277-5047. 815-277-5047. You can call in to share your opinion. Also, want to encourage the community to visit our website, theprogressivemindshow.com, and make your contribution, because we need your support to keep going. So everything, whatever you give us goes a long way in supporting us. So please make sure you do that. It's theprogressivemindshow.com. For all of you who have donated, thank you so much. Pastor Ate, I really want to thank you. Johnny Woods, thank you for your donation. We really, really appreciate it. Neka Obasi, really, really appreciate you for your kind donation. And of course, one of my guests here, Ted. Ted has been a wonderful person. He doesn't only come to the show to support, to help. He also supports, with his finances. So really, really support. I really, really appreciate you, Ted, for helping in that manner. Now, what is so? I will have the lawyer give us maybe a breakdown of some of the terminologies and the words of jargons, whether if jargons you may call it, that we're hearing on TV so far. Impeachment, insurrection. John, what does it mean literally to say that? If someone says insurrection, what's that supposed to mean?
I guess I don't know the legal term of insurrection, but I think what the term means is to take over the government, to overthrow the government. The word that you're hearing a lot of is sedition, and I actually do have a definition of sedition, and that is if two or more persons, a state or territory, seek to destroy by force the government, okay, or, and this is where I think that these folks probably committed sedition, to oppose by force the authority thereof, or by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States. What did these folks do? And what was their intent? Their intent was to stop the counting of the votes in which Biden won. They wanted to stop it. That's what they said. They said, we're going to stop this, and we're going to stop it by force. That is the definition of sedition. And I think Donald Trump led them. I think he had the intent to lead them. I think he's probably at least evidence to suggest that he's of sedition.
Thanks for responding to that. Ted, maybe John, if you want to take this up on to Ben, Nana, I'm going to come to you in a little bit, but I wanted to ask Ted, and then again, John, you can chime in. If what John is saying, actually, before we go to that, how many times because we know the president Donald Trump and his lawyers tried to overturn the elections by going to court, making cases that it was flawed, there was the elections was rigged. How many courts have they been to so far, and how many times has this been debunked? Because the reason why I'm asking this is that I think it went to the Supreme Court. I heard it went to the Supreme Court. It's been to higher courts, and some of the judges that overturned this case, that there was no case, that the president didn't have a case at all, were judges that the president himself had picked. So I just want you to respond to that. Is that a case? And how many times have this been overturned? So that we can establish that, look, there's nothing fishy, because again, we just want to make sure that people get it clear that it's not just saying, but this has been authenticated by the law that Biden won fair and square.
Yeah, so, there are over 60 different cases that have been thrown out. Supreme Court has refused to take the case twice.
You said 16?
60. 60.
Okay.
So the Department of Homeland Security said that Trump's Department of Homeland Security said the election was safe, and that there was no foul play in the election. By comparison, the FBI said the 2016 election was problematic because of foreign interference. The FBI said the same now, that this election was fine as well. Even those who were attempting to say that the insurrection was promoted and pushed by, groups like Antifa or Black Lives Matter, the FBI rebutted that theory as well. And these are Trump's FBI, Trump officials. This is the Trump Department of Homeland Security. These are Trump appointed judges who are overturning his opposition. And so what we must understand is that this is really much ado about nothing. It is ridiculous. The voting systems company, Dominion Voting Systems, is suing the Trump administration, one of Trump's lawyers, for over $1 billion right now for defamation. Because they have been, for the last few months, talking about how Dominion is a tool of the Venezuelan government, and Dominion software, they tricked and stole the votes. And you've got people out here that are honestly sheep, that are ignorant enough to believe this foolishness. And this is why the idea of free speech, people have to understand, our lawyer could explain even further on this, that people think that that speech is fully free, but it is not. There are consequences to what we say, because what we say can have influence on other people. And so Dominion, rightfully so, is suing the Trump administration because they have used this misinformation campaign to really destroy their business, right? They're a private business who does voting hardware and software, but fully under the authority of all the state and local governments. The state governments have the power to hand count. They run the ballots, all these other kinds of things. Dominion has all of this information. If you go to their website, you can see all their checks and balances and that sort of thing. And so they have become a scapegoat, and it has really damaged. It's done nothing wrong. And yet, if you get, a lie, as it says, if you tell a lie a couple different times, you say it enough times, people begin to believe it. And that, my friends, is tragic, and it's dangerous. And yes, the president, and not just him, but the president ought to be held accountable. Now to say this quickly, the president is not the only person that can be impeached, right? Many federal officials can be impeached. And so we ought to be looking at potentially impeaching even some of our senators as well.
Who is Antifa? We hear the term a lot. Again, for the purposes of some of my audience, I like to break things down to the layman's understanding. We hear Antifa. Who are they? What's the name? Why the name Antifa?
Yeah, John, do you want to handle this one, or? Right.
I mean, I'm no expert on it.
I can answer, but go ahead. I just want to, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, the name comes from anti-fascist. Antifa, they're anti-fascist. I think what it is a very loose organization. I don't even think it's an organization. I think the people who confront white supremacists and Nazis and fascists at protests and whatnot. So I think to call them an organization is false. They are a group of people with similar purpose, but they are not an organization.
Okay.
And they've used violence, right? They've used violence in the past to push their agenda. But it almost is like, I don't know, this whole gaslighting thing where I look at, and I find it laughable, right? Like people who are violating rights and abusing authority, that sort of thing. And then if you step out of line in one small space, right? So you have an overwhelming number of Black Lives Matter protests across the world this summer, overwhelmingly peaceful. And you've got a handful of people that burn some garbage cans and loot some stores and things like that. And we're trying to make the moral equivalency. And that is just so manipulative, right? And false. And I just refuse to go with it. And so we've got to stop talking about Antifa and stop talking about Black Lives Matter right now and stop talking about what Nancy Pelosi tweeted one time in 2016 that the election was potentially rigged or whatever, and start talking about what is happening this week with this president and this leadership and this current Republican Party.
And you know what? To go back with what Mr. Williams said a little bit ago and about this stolen election, believe me, or this alleged stolen, it doesn't come out of thin air. Unfortunately, the Republican, and I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I'm independent. The Republican Party has lost its way. It has become extremely immoral, and it has been involved in voter suppression for quite some time. It's doing it through gerrymandering. All right, they control a lot of the state legislatures, and they're gerrymandering, which means they're creating voting blocks that exclude people of color, that exclude Democrats, that only include Republicans, and then the Republicans get into the state legislatures and they pass laws making voting more restrictive. The voter ID, that is making voting more restrictive. This is not a heck of a lot different than the old poll taxes of the Jim Crow days. This is an extension of the Jim Crow poll tax, and the Republican Party is responsible for this. And this insurrection was designed to negate a democratically elected president, and that's Biden. It's not new. This is very extreme, but it's not new.
Ted, it's not new. Okay, so we've had something similar, but so I want Bernard to respond, but when we come back, maybe Ted and John can help us understand if we've had something close to this in the history of this country. Anything that's, I mean, if you all want to help with that, that'll be great. But Ben, a lot has been said. I know you have taken in all that's been saying. I don't know if you want to something that you wanted to comment on that I missed to give you the opportunity. Please go ahead.
This election was stolen is really ridiculous. I mean, if you have any understanding of basic statistics, if you look back in 2016, let's take these three states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Trump won Michigan by about 11,000 votes, and about 100,000 blacks in Detroit didn't vote. I mean, if you consider the ratio that about 85% of blacks vote Democratic, you know, if these people showed up, he wasn't going to win. The same thing happened in Detroit, Wisconsin. A lot of black folks in Detroit, in Milwaukee, didn't vote. And then in Pennsylvania, where Trump won by about 40,000. This time, they showed up in their numbers and voted. So I was, you know, I mean, this is really beats my mind. But, you know, this is the nature of fascism, where it invokes lies and caters to the basic instincts of, you know, the base instincts of a lot of people. And then they come out with this cognitive dissonance that even as they see the evidence, they tend to disregard it. Now, I want to add one more thing, though. I think the media has been reprehensible when it comes to this whole movement and the way it's been legitimized. So let's be a little bit honest. You see, people trying to overtake sovereign governments, right? It's not something new. This is something both parties have supported in other countries. I mean, they were doing it in Hong Kong. It doesn't matter what you think about Hong Kong, they do have their laws. And you should expect them to use their laws, right, to do whatever they want to do. You do it in other countries. Now it seems to be coming back, and the media can't seem to see the parallel, because for a very long time, they've been siding with one particular narrative. See, Trump has marketed himself as some kind of an outsider, but all because the people who follow him are so misinformed or suffer from cognitive dissonance. I mean, this is a guy who came to power and gave the biggest tax cuts to his rich friends. But then they still think he's part of them. For the Christians, the guy can't even quote a verse in the Bible. He doesn't go to church. You know? And then there's one other thing about Christianity that I think, so we don't have to lump the evangelical movement with all Christian. I'm a Christian too, and I'm a progressive Christian. I believe the fundament of Christianity is justice. Anytime I get into a debate with some of these evangelicals, I refer them to the book of Amos. And if anybody has time, just go through the book of Amos, where it is very clear that injustice is something God, the Christian God, dislikes. He condemned and judged a lot of nations at that time for treating their poor with disrespect, right? For enslaving others. So this whole idea that Christianity has to do with cherry-picked issues such as abortion, even immigration. Doesn't the Bible say you were alien? You were alien in another country, so you defend the alien and the fatherless? Because the evangelical movement is not a Christian movement. It's a white nationalist movement masquerading as a Christian movement because it's so easy. The Bible says the angel of light can masquerade, the angel of darkness can masquerade as an angel of light. It's so easy to deceive people who are not that informed with this whole Christian values while pushing an agenda that is not even linked with Christian fundamentals.
When you say nationalist, can you give us again in a layman's understanding who is a nationalist, or what is a nationalist?
Well, let me give you a quote. You know, Charles de Gaulle of France, who supposedly was a big French patriot, a nationalist. Do you know how he described nationalism?
No.
He said, patriotism is the love for one's country, but nationalism is the hatred for others. See what I mean?
Okay.
Than the love for a country.
Okay.
Most of these people, it's not because they may love America, but they hate other people more than they love America.
They hate other people in their country more than
not other people in their country. They are perceived enemies. They hate people who don't look like them.
Okay.
Who don't share their values,
okay.
Right? They hate them more than they love their country. Even as some of these people are Americans, they hate them for what they believe.
Right.
So patriotism, if you're a patriot, then you should be able to point out what? The ills of your own society, because you know if the country doesn't deal with its own misdeeds, it's going to end up in what? The country is going to be destroyed.
Right.
And that is what the kind of boldness, the courage, and the genuineness is missing in the discourse of this country. Right. And in the media false, now, they know Trump, is pushing all of us into hell, so they have to take a stand. But at what point, when this same narrative happens in another country or in another community, they haven't sided with those people? This is a problem. And Trump is exploiting it. He's going to exploit it because they know there are a lot of hypocrites on both sides. And he's a big hypocrite, but he's shameless, so he doesn't care.
Okay. I want to throw this one out there. The people that protested at the Capitol Hill, some say, they are just patriots defending or protesting for what they believe is right. Now, I want you all to help us understand what you would call the thing that happened at the Capitol Hill. Were they just regular Americans who were protesting because they believed that the election had been stolen from their leader, who was Donald Trump, who they believe in, or there were other motives behind it? And I would like John, if John can help. I know you responded to this already, but give us a clear visual of what you understand went down at the Capitol Hill last week.
It was an insurrection. I think that it was a insurrection. I suppose there were some people there who just stood around and didn't do much of anything. But what I saw, those people breaking into the legislative branch of the United States were in order to prevent government work and through violence. And that is an insurrection.
Now, and some people say some people call this group of people patriots. Some are saying they're patriots.
Then that's a very narrow of patriotism. That means I want my view and you can't have yours, because they were. And by the way, most of them were. They were there under false pretenses. That goes back to the votes were rigged, et cetera, et cetera. That's a bunch of nonsense. And you can feed a bunch of people nonsense and say, go hang someone, go lynch someone, go take over the Capitol. And that is not a defense. It's not a defense at all. Head on our shoulders, and he expects us to use it.
because we were hearing chants of hang Mike Pence.
Yes.
Like hang the sitting vice president of the United States.
I think at least people are going to find themselves sitting at defense tables before long, and I think some of them are going to get some pretty stiff sentences. And
I don't know if Ted wanted to contribute to this. So why do you think that, Ted, do you think that if it had been Black Lives Matter movement that had gone close to the Capitol in the manner that we saw, what do you think would have been the scenario?
I think we know what the scenario would have been, my brother Sina. We've all sort of seen that. We recognize it. We understand that law enforcement in this country has a very long history of treating people that are non-white differently than they treat people who are white, treating people who are wealthy differently than they treat people who are poor. And so I would not be surprised if there was a huge show of force. I mean, obviously, let's think about this, right? And let's even take out the Black Lives Matter. Let's say it was a group of Arab citizens, right, who came. How long do you think they'd been in the Capitol, right? You know, you could get the military to respond within 5 minutes in Washington, D.C.
Right.
Particularly, you are attacking the Capitol, but the seat of government. But what I believe happened was people looked at these folks and they go, "Oh, well, they're just, you know, they're just patriots, and they're not threatening. They're just coming in and you know, the show of force that would have happened if this was an Arab group or an African American group or a Latino American group. I think we all know what would have happened, unfortunately. But let me just say this real quickly. I want to read just a short section of the articles of impeachment against President Trump right now that just went through, because the question about what happened that day is so critical. And here's, just give me 2 seconds. This is the actual text of the article. January 6, 2021, pursuant to the 12th Amendment of the United States, the Congress met for a joint session of Congress. President Trump addressed a crowd of political supporters nearby. There, he reiterated false claims that we won this election, won it by a landslide. He willfully made statements that encouraged and foreseeably resulted in imminent lawless action at the Capitol. Incited by President Trump, a mob unlawfully breached the Capitol. And it goes on from there. But I think it's really important that we recognize what is happening here, what has happened here, what he's being accused of. This is not an issue of trying to be divisive or anything like that. It is an issue of holding people accountable for what happened on Wednesday. And I believe that more people must be held accountable, even beyond the president.
Well, thank you so much for helping us break these issues down so far. My guest, Attorney John Benson, Ted Williams. Bernard, it's 7 minutes past 7 p.m. We are still on the Progressive Mind show. It is about time that we look at some of these issues within the context of regular folks, right? Again, the higher ups do what they have to do politically to govern our society, but then again, everything they do and everything they say, affects us more so. And so it's very important that as these things are happening, we talk about them and look at ways that it's going to impact us, it's going to impact our world. And so we're very grateful that you've joined us. I see Lyra Moni. Lyra Moni, hi, how are you doing? Ogbona Joy is also watching us. Thank you for joining the feed. Please help share it so we can get the word out. I wanted to have a follow-up question. Some people are saying that in the name of, or for the sake of reconciliation, because during President-elect Joe Biden's victory speech, one of the things that he emphasized on was reconciliation, unity, bringing the nation together, because it's deeply divided and all of that. And some people are also saying that now that this is happening, with the sitting president Donald Trump having 7 days to end his term, do they need, it does not matter if they impeach him or not. And if they do impeach him, things might get worse. And even the president said on TV that be careful what you wish for. So having all this in context, is it necessary that the House move ahead? Of course, he's being impeached, but does he have to be impeached, or should this? I mean, or should they should have just let him run its course? And I'll have Bernard respond to this.
Well, I think there's some political calculations here. I do think they want to impeach him, so he won't have to. He was not able to run for any political office again.
Okay.
I think there are people in the Republican Party who want to get rid of him so they can have some control over the party.
Okay.
So I think those are some of the games that are going on.
Okay. Okay. All right. I don't know, John and Ted, I don't know if you want to respond to this. Some people are saying you shouldn't do it for the sake of reconciliation. I don't know if you wanted to comment on this.
Be something like this. Let President Biden seek to reconcile the nation. Let him do that. But at the same time, Trump needs to be held accountable in some form or another. The impeachment process is one way. Criminal prosecution is another way. And let's not forget that there's a few indictments waiting to be brushed off in New York. I should backtrack a little bit. There are investigations going on against Mr. Trump in New York that have to do with his taxes, that have to do with his charity work, that have to do with his campaign financing. Perhaps what could happen is the Justice Department could assist New York State in the prosecution of Mr. Trump, and he can be dealt with by the state of New York.
Upon what basis is the president being impeached? And can you explain the process? The presidents get impeached when others commit probably the same thing that he did. They will call it whoever does it, that individual may go through what, prosecution, trial, and indictment. Why the term impeachment when it comes to presidents?
Because it's a political process. That's why.
Okay. Right.
It's a political process.
Okay. I'm just trying to understand the why they use the word impeachment when it comes to presidents. Again, for the sake of some of my audience, I want things to be broken down to the very broken down, to the way to layman's understanding.
Well, so the impeachment process is really for any federal official to remove them from office. There have been 20 in history, 20 impeachments, and only 8 people have actually been convicted and removed. 4 of the people who have been impeached, 3 of the people have been impeached from presidents. None of them has actually ever been convicted in the Senate. So the impeachment actually happens in the House first, and then the trial for conviction happens in the Senate. And so it's a very rare instance that people actually are convicted. But what it would do for President Trump if he were convicted, it would bar him from running for federal office again. It would take away his pension, which is not a big deal for him in that way. But I think that I am with John on this. People always keep saying to me, "Oh, well, he's about to be out of office. Just let him go ahead and go." And I would liken that to literally someone who was stealing from a company, but then they're about to retire in a week. And they go, "Oh, well, they've been stealing from the company, this and that. Don't worry about it. They'll be gone in a week." Who would do that? We would never do that, right? And so, the idea of doing that is ridiculous. I think Nancy Pelosi said it best. I think someone said to her recently, just yesterday, I believe, "Why don't you go easy and this and that and negotiate?" And she goes, "The U.S. doesn't negotiate with terrorists," right? And in her mind, that this domestic terrorism was not something that we should negotiate, that we should be soft on. That I'm very happy that they did, because honestly, shame on the Democrats in the House if they were to walk away from this and to live with themselves after this time and say, you know, we had probably the greatest threat to our national security from a U.S. sitting president, and we did nothing about it. So I'm grateful, whatever side of the aisle you're on, I'm grateful that we have people that were at least willing to stand up. And there are political consequences potentially, but to stand up and say this is unacceptable, and if it means impeaching twice or 3 times or 4 times, whatever it means, we will not stand by and allow this to happen.
Now, so currently we know that the House voted for him for the president, so he's being impeached. In the House, so he has to go to the Senate, right? Now, how likely? I mean, when is that? How soon is that going to take place? And is there any likelihood that he's going to get impeached in the Senate?
Yeah, so Mitch McConnell, who is still the head of the Senate, would have to sort of reconvene a kind of emergency session of the Senate to start the trial. As John said, most likely what will happen is that there will be potentially a trial after the president leaves office. There have only been 2 people to be impeached after leaving office. And some scholars believe that potentially, some legal scholars believe that potentially they should not be impeaching him after he leaves office, that the impeachment process was specifically for the removal from office.
Okay.
And so there'll be some questions around that and whether it'll proceed or not and that sort of thing. But I would suggest that most likely you will see potentially the trial go forward. Now, Joe Biden just really wants no parts of this, right? Joe Biden really wants to move forward on his agenda. And yet, you know, this is probably bigger than him, right? It's bigger than his personal desire to move forward on his agenda. It really is about the security of the country. It really is about future insurrections. And people need to understand that when they do these kinds of things, there will be consequences, no matter who they are. And I think, you know, I don't know if you have seen the social media video of the young woman who was maced. There's a young woman who was maced. And, you know, for her and other people, they felt like we're above the law, you know, and that I think we see clearly that they're not.
Is the nation, I think it's obvious that the nation is divided. And if so, do you think that this whole impeachment process, if he does finally get removed out of, from office before he finishes his term, is going to deepen the divide? And how is that going to look like for America?
I just want to say this quickly on that one, and I'll be quiet on this, but I mean, I hear people say that all the time, and I'm like, so you think that if the House decided tomorrow they were not going to impeach Donald Trump, that all the people that were on the right that were yelling about, down with, Mike Pence and down with Nancy Pelosi, that all of a sudden, because they did not go forward on impeachment, and they were going to come and sing Kumbaya with the rest of the country and everything will be okay.
Right.
That's not going to happen. I don't think that this is going to make the country more divided. It's just holding people accountable, and that's all it is.
What lies ahead of the Biden's administration regarding everything that has gone on? So this, obviously the people who are in support of Donald Trump and his ideologies, of course, whether he gets impeached or not, they're going to follow him. How do you foresee all this playing out, and how difficult would it be? How difficult or easy how do you think the Biden administration would be able to navigate through all of this this year? Bearing in mind that COVID is still around, he has to handle that. How is the whole thing looking like? And maybe I want what is his name, Bernard to respond to that. How difficult do you envisage?
Well, he has a lot of challenges. Trump has done a lot of harm, and some of them it looks like it's intentional to make Biden's work very difficult.
Okay.
In terms of healing the country, I think people are entrenched in their ways, right? In their philosophies. People are the Trump camp in particular. They are not going to budge. They have this deluded notion that they are the only one who knows what is right for the country. They call themselves patriots, right? Even though they don't understand, they don't even realize that as the saying goes, they say nationalism is the last refuge of a scoundrel, right? The problem Biden has is to work on the economy. The economy is not really good, and as long as the economy raises a lot of challenge for most of the people, then you can always have a demagogue like Trump to come in and exploit the situation for his own selfish gains. So on the international scene too, there's a lot of damage. He just there's a lot of damage that's been done. And if you go back to the Obama administration, especially with the Iranian agreement that he went around and just tore it into pieces, that is posing some security issues for the United States and the Middle East. He just Pompeo is around causing so much damage that his own European allies don't even want to see him anymore. So those are the challenges they'll have to contend with. But in terms of reconciling the country, I think we'll just have to have this thing play out. Once the economy gets in a good shape and people are able to mind their own businesses, financially, and people are not so pressured by some of the economic malices in the society, then these people, I don't think I believe their voices will soften. They won't be heard as much. They'll become fringe movements. So that's what I think.
John, do you think that? Yeah.
I don't know what it means to heal the nation. I don't think the nation has ever been healed. It's always been in conflict. And if you look at the fault lines of today, these fault lines are not much different than, say, during the Vietnam War. I mean, there is always going to be clash and fighting and sharp elbows and navigating, but it's clear some of the problems now are back to what Mr. Williams said, these corporations are simply bad citizens. They've walked away from pensions. They've walked away from health care. We don't have a fair health care system. The health care system in the past was, corporations and business, you got your health care through your work. And that worked for a while. That's worked for the last 30, 40 years. It's not working anymore. So we need good health care. All right. We need a good pension system. We need a more equal distribution of wealth. There are serious grievances within this nation, and poor people are getting poorer. Rich people are getting richer, and that definitely has to be addressed. In fact, I find it ironic because I've been kind of watching that or saying that for my entire adult career. For 30 years, I've been seeing the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. Never did I believe that we would get a Donald Trump out of it, but we did, because people are so angry and frustrated and upset. So, I mean, how do you heal? Spread the wealth around a little bit. Make sure people have good health care, and then let them complain and cry about all kinds of stuff, but make sure they can feed their kids, make sure they can take care of their wives and husbands when they're sick, and then, let them argue with each other.
I think when everybody has some money to spend and to take care of their family, I think tensions will ease, because I think money solves all problems. So, it's good you mentioned that, because tensions would always rise when there is economic hardships, when there is inequality. Of course, that's when the group of people that feel that they are, the group of people that feel injustice being meted out to them would always want to push back. And so that's why Peter Tosh says that there is no peace when you can find justice. And so I think that inequality is always a common denominator that promotes peace and promotes reconciliation. So I think hopefully the Biden's administration has a lot of good policies that would help curb and help with the reconciliation process, and maybe we can talk about some of them. But Ted, I want to ask you a quick question. Maybe all of you, maybe I'll have you or take turns in answering. Give me a straight answer to this. Is American democracy perfect?
Oh, of course not. Never has been and never will be.
Okay, John.
Winston Churchill.
Yeah. I'll come back to you to expand on that. But I want you all to give me a straight answer to this, John.
No, it's not perfect.
It's not perfect. Bernard?
No.
Okay. All right. Ted, please go ahead.
I'll just say quickly, Winston Churchill called democracy the worst form of government except all the other ones that have been tried. And so we know that democracy is highly imperfect. In fact, you can make the case that, democracy is slow, getting everyone engaged, trying to get people to vote. All of these questions, all these issues are really, really challenging. And yet, it's what we have. It's all we have. And so it is it is as good or as bad as we make it. And I do think that there has been, in many, many ways, the society, through both capitalism and democracy, have really helped to create a standard of living for people that has been very beneficial, and that people want to come and be a part of. And yet, if we do not have a social safety net, and if we continue to push inequality, even the benefits that we've had over the years from both capitalism and democracy will cease to exist. And that is what I'm most concerned about.
Wow. So at this point, what should we expect for next week? I mean, the president Joe Biden, it will be inaugurated next week, Wednesday. We've seen scores of National Guard being deployed to the Capitol. There are issues and reports, information coming out that there's going to be a lot of what we saw last week Wednesday at the Capitol, a lot of protests and riots, to destabilize somewhat or to kind of prevent the inauguration. What should we be expecting coming next week Wednesday? Is the country safe? And should people not panic? Because what we're hearing is scary. To see that many 20,000 Marine or National Guard being deployed to the Capitol Hill. Have you guys ever seen this? I mean, John and Ted, in the history of this country, has this ever happened? That this many National Guard had to be deployed to the Capitol to protect an inauguration of a president?
Probably in the Civil War.
Okay, probably the Civil War. So we'll say that this is unprecedented, right? This is unprecedented. So, how is it looking like? Should people be apprehensive or remain calm? Is everything okay? People are scared of there could be a civil war, because if people are coming, if nationalists and are coming with guns to protest of Joe Biden's elections, and we have this many soldiers at Capitol Hill, one can put two and two together, Ted.
So I just say quickly, throw a little historic context. Election of 1876, Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel L. Tilden really were fighting over essentially one electoral vote. At that time, there was a 4-month process period between the election and the inauguration. And they had to sit down, their teams, and strike up a compromise, right, for a period of time. It was a very contentious election. They were both trying to seat their electors, and so both teams sat down in Washington D.C., came up with the compromise of 1877, which ultimately ended the Reconstruction, sold African Americans out down the river, if you will, threw them under the bus, literally. And ushered in an era of Jim Crow segregation for almost 100 years. So that was, right, the last time this election was this contentious. In the year 2000, we also had pretty contentious election. The person responsible for certifying the Electoral College votes was Al Gore, who's vice president, and he humbly kind of just went ahead and sort of, for the sake of the country, did not continue the fight. I would say that we oftentimes in our 24-hour news cycle tend to, and I'm not dismissing what could potentially happen, but I've been through a lot of national crises And I think that we are probably going to be just fine on the 20th. The world's not going to end. We're not going to break out into civil war.
Okay.
We have some people arrested, and that'll probably be it. And we'll move forward with Joe Biden as president.
Okay, good to hear. Good to hear, because it's a lot of tension out there. Bernard, let me ask you though, has America, I mean, I'm just going to say this. Do you think that America has lost its superpower reputation? If yes, how can it get it back?
Why do we need a superpower in the world, right?
Well, okay. Well, sometimes, you know, based off what goes on in other countries, we know that. I mean, I'm an African, and we've had a lot of African leaders who have been very autocratic. If you look at Paul Biya in Cameroon, he's been there over 40 years. Before Togo, Togolese president Yadema ruled for about 30 years and passed it on to his son. There are scores of cases like that in Africa. And sometimes you would want an intervention. People are oppressed so much to the point where right now there is slavery going on in Mauritania. There's a group called the Abolition Institute who are here. Shantana, my friend, who is working on that, trying to end slavery in Mauritania. And he actually got the backing from high, you know, from people in high places in this country who are helping him to try to end slavery in Mauritania. So, and there are a lot of cases like this in developing countries. And sometimes when these things are going on, the people there, I have a personal friend who has been working with the people of Oroma in Ethiopia. She went to Congress, made a case for the people of Oromia, and now the situation is getting better in Ethiopia. So what I'm saying is that maybe we don't need a world superpower, but there's always that big brother. America has always been looked at. I mean, that's the truth from a lot of folks from America. We've always looked at America to come to our aid when, you know, regular folks are going through oppression in developing countries. So my question is that we may not need that superpower title, but do you think the reputation of big brother, you know, come and help us when we're going through issues, it's no longer, I mean, has it been lost? Do you think that a lot of people now do not have that trust that America is the country that we can call on if we're going through some of these issues that I just mentioned?
Well, the statement is a contradiction, because this is the problem the United States has always had. It's a democracy at home, but it's an imperial power outside. And this is a contradiction.
Okay.
You can't be a democracy at home and then impose your will on other countries in the world, because what's going to happen, people are going to push back. I don't know where people get this idea that the U.S. has been on the side of freedom fighters all over the world. I mean, you talk about Paul Biya and Yadema, who's been supporting them?
It's the French people, yeah.
The French, the West. Yeah. France is a second-rate power.
Mm-hmm.
France could only do what is allowed by the United States.
Right.
The United States is on top of the NATO allies, okay?
But Liberia has gone through a whole bunch of situations, though, right?
Well, look at Liberia, who supported Doe when Doe came into power.
Well, yes.
U.S. supported Doe to a point, because Liberia was a bastion for U.S. bases, and they used Liberia, the Voice of America at that time, was stationed Liberia as a surveillance country across the whole subcontinent, right? The West African continent.
Right.
So this is a problem. And the problem is the U.S. has its imperial interest, okay? And these interests, like Kissinger says, we have permanent interest, not permanent friends. So we could go back into history. Did the U.S. come to the side of apartheid, South African forces? No, it did not, until it was forced to. Okay? So I think we need to be very honest about ourselves. And I think the progressive movement in the United States is trying to push this narrative to become mainstream. We need to, if we want democracy, then the United States needs to push democracy genuinely in places where democracy is needed, not only in places where economic interest, right? Define democracy because of economic interest. It's not going to be a superpower anymore. I mean, that is over.
Okay.
And I think that is where the conflict is. Because right now, I think the US had the opportunity with the dissolution of the Soviet Union, right? What did the US policymakers do? They embarked on these senseless war. You know, Trump, let me tell you a story. Trump called former President Jimmy Carter, and said he was worried about China overtaking the US as the foremost economic power of the world. And Carter was like, yes, I feel you. I know. You should be worried as a president. But then Carter responded this way. He says, ever since we established diplomatic relations with China, right? How many wars have China been involved in? None. He says, we are still at war, right? And in our history, we've only been at peace 16 years. That's what Carter said. This is a former president of the United States. We've been at peace 16 years, making us the most warlike country in the what? In the world, in the history of mankind. So I think pressure has to be pushed on the US elites, the policymakers, to reverse this militarism and invest in as a people. The US has so many assets. It has human capital, it has technology. But if the US is going to redirect this into militarism so it can control other countries, it's not going to work. They need a lot of countries that can protect themselves. They can defend themselves militarily now. And, with the rise of China economically, it's very difficult for the US to go around using the economic carrot especially in Africa. I mean, look at Africa. What China is giving, the West can give. And a lot of people don't understand why China has influence in Africa.
Good. So now that you brought Africa in this discussion, what do you think would have been the scenario? I mean, look, one of the reasons why I talked about US superpower and US being world police and coming to the aid of some developing countries is that the Africa has been known for a lot of coups, coup d'etats, and overtaking of governments and all of that. And so when we are going through, and then I can speak for Africa because that's where I'm from. And so when we have a lot of these situations going on, who can we call on to be a mediator? Sometimes you need a neutralizer.
Well, you don't need a mediator. I mean, basically, every country
So would you propose that these countries who have had their people being oppressed for years,
oppressed by who?
Well, by their own leaders,
who imposes these leaders on the people?
Now, in Nigeria, for instance, we had the EndSARS situation going on in Nigeria, right? And we know the massive amount of corruption that is going on in Nigeria, in a lot of African countries. I just want to use Nigeria because we had the EndSARS situation and we had the Lekki shooting and all of that. The allegation of government shooting its own people, right? And so, whether somebody imposed somebody on the people, how is it that a sovereign countries like countries in Africa allow outsiders to impose leaders on them? And secondly, when these leaders come into power, they want to stay in power forever, and then they oppress their own people. So my thing is that if you have leaders oppressing their own people in very gruesome manners, sometimes it's not good to have a mediator who can come and say, you know what, let's look at the issues and let's be the police here. Let's be the referee. Don't you think that sometimes we need people like that?
No, we don't need that, because anybody who comes in has his own interest. Okay. Why do they have to come in and free you if you can't free yourself?
But there's, like they say, there's no free lunch in this world. So if I am coming to help you, I need to get something out of that too, right?
Well, no, but then this is the problem. We need to stop this being condescending and looking up to other people to solve our problems.
Okay.
There been situations where people have risen up, right, and threw out oppressive governments, like it happened in the Congo. I mean, if you look at the history of Africa, who imposed Mobutu Sese Seko on the Congolese? The United States and the West. And the fact is, people don't want people. Congo is in a mess because it's such a strategic place, so rich that a lot of Western economies can't just function properly without these resources. So they have to impose chaos on these people.
Okay.
When Mobutu left, what did they do? They have an ally in Paul Kagame doing the same thing, and then they rehabilitate the person like Paul Kagame to make him seem like he's such a great leader. He's also an autocrat.
Well,
doesn't he show up in Washington? Doesn't he show up in European corridor? Doesn't he show up in all these countries that you're looking up to help Africans?
Okay, good. So we'll come back to the main the discussion for this evening. But the last thing I wanted to say on this is that even though Paul Kagame is tutored around by some people as an autocrat, Rwanda is one of the best economies.
No, it's not. It's not.
No. Okay.
That is the rehabilitation they do. The same way Trump says he won the election and people believe it. Rwanda is a least developed country. It's one of the poorest countries in Africa.
In sub-Saharan Africa?
In Africa. Go and look. It doesn't come close to your country, Ghana.
No,
its GDP is about $9 billion. It's not a very rich country at all. But you see, this
I'm not saying it's rich. I'm saying it's one of the very developing countries.
What is it developed about? How could you be developed if you're regarded as a
I think developing is when people in the country have good roads, good basic. Wait. Let me. Nana. You know what I'm saying? Developing country, right? If a developing country, if your economy have basic infrastructure, healthcare, education, people have jobs, right? There is infrastructure like transportation. When you have the fundamentals of the economy doing very well, right, and people are not necessarily migrating outside to seek for greener pastures, these are indications that your economy or your country is doing well. Now, there have been a lot of analysts and reporters that have given good reports on the economy of Rwanda, but we will be a subject that will be debated on another day, right? So let's come back to the U.S. economy, the home of the brave,
yes,
and the way forward.
I know that, but we need to be very careful. Believing lies.
Okay.
Well, we're talking about, because Trump has been perpetuating a lot of lies that people, and the same thing with Rwanda. If you're regarded as a least developed economy, that means you don't have these things. They talk about they have these things. They don't have it. Go and check the statistics. They don't.
I have checked some. So
I know they are human resource.
Okay. All right.
They don't have it. They are far below your country, Ghana. Okay?
Well,
it's like
you're staying out of this one.
But you see, this is the point.
Again, we can debate.
People can push a lie, and people see that's truth. You see Trump do the same.
No, but Trump is not the one. Listen. In the case of Rwanda, it is not Paul Kagame that is saying that his economy is doing well. It is not him. I mean, in this case, Trump is the sole marketer of his party and his government, right? He is he's the main man who is doing the marketing and the promotion. In the case of Kagame, he's not the one saying it.
Oh, he is.
No, of course
he is.
Which president will say anything good about his country?
Let me tell you something. Let's get this straight. I mean, I'm a student of economics. I can look up stuff. Okay,
right.
Look up stuff. If you want to know indicators of economic growth, you can look at that.
Yeah.
The point is, we were talking about people being imposed on specific African countries. The point that he's been imposed because he's a murderous autocrat, right? There has to be a narrative, right? They have to rehabilitate its image that he's doing so well. But how could a country be doing so well when half of its budget is provided by the United States and Western Europe? You can't be doing well if you get most of your money from Western Europe.
But the United States economy is doing well, and it has a lot of wait.
We can go offline and talk about it. And this is the problem. People believing in lies.
We know the United States is heavily in debt, but the economy is relatively doing well. If it's not doing well, a lot of migrants will be coming here.
Well, the United States has its currency is the global reserve currency.
Okay.
The
So,
United States money is what we use to buy most of the strategic commodities of the world, right?
okay.
You cannot compare the United States to Rwanda.
No, I'm not.
You compare Rwanda to Nigeria.
No, I'm not.
See,
Yeah, I know.
we need to get this straight.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you so much. I think that was just sidetracking a little bit from today's, but it's all in the
They
context.
love to hear that too, right?
Yeah.
Hey, we're all here to learn.
So, well, we have been talking about Home of the Brave, the way forward. Basically, looking at the riots that happened last week at the Capitol Hill, the seat of government of the United States of America, where we all call the home or the beacon of democracy. How is it looking now? With the whole world looking at the home or the beacon of democracy, the seat of government of the United States of America going down like that, by its own people. Now, if somebody says that, oh, the Chinese or another country can break into the seat of government in that manner, there'll be doubts. Everybody will be like, no country can do that. We watch movies. I've seen the movie Olympia Has Fallen and White, and all of that. All those movies depicts the United States being attacked in various manners. But these are all fiction and movies, and you think that it can never happen. But then we saw it happen live by civilians, right? Most of them were not carrying guns, at least from the footage that we saw, but these were regular people that broke into the seat of government when actually the government was in procession. And so it kind of brings to perspective, where is our world going to? If the United States is looking like this, then what should we be looking out for? What is 2021 bringing to us? And how is the Biden's administration going to deal with all of this? And we have been doing that with Attorney John Benson, Ted Williams III, and Bernard Nanaya Efriye. We also have Ate Krong, who just joined us on the feed. He says, it seems, just read his comment and then we'll go to the panel in a little bit. Ate says, it seems the USA is still trying to be imperialist. And then he goes on to say, because it's a capitalist country with the top people controlling the government, we find that a lot of political decisions, whether wars overseas or taxes at home, are implemented to support the personal financial interests of the richest of the rich. And then we have Joy Ogbonna says, so proud of you. Thank you so much. And she says, great job, Alinko. Thank you for bringing that in for a comment. Lyra Mona says, wow. And then we have another comment here I want to read out. It says, it is clear that Rwanda's economy has significantly developed over the past 25 years, but the Rwandan model for economic development could not be easily used elsewhere, as it has arguably required political dominance and centralized control to achieve its success. Okay, thank you so much, DJ Kenyi, for bringing this one in. If you want to call and ask a question or contribute, the number is 815-277-5047, 815-277-5047. It's 7:47 p.m. Central Time. Still watching the Progressive Mind Show live on Facebook and on YouTube. We're also live on Trend Africa TV and MyStar online radio station based out in Washington, D.C. It is a Pan-African radio station for the discerning listener. And Johnny Woods says, I am just enjoying this discussion. Thank you so much, Johnny Woods. I guess I've been wonderful breaking issues down for us. So we have like 10 minutes to wrap up. Gentlemen, we have looked at the riots that happened last week at the Capitol Hill. The people that were behind it, their belief and the ideas for doing what they did, the implication of what happened is what we are trying to look at now. And my guests have done a good job by having us understand that this is not going to break the will of American democracy. This is not going to have a dent on, I would say, affect Joe Biden in bringing the nation together. And who knows, the nation might just come together. If it doesn't, I think that it will still be democracy in progress, right? Because they just said that America's democracy is not perfect. So if you ever thought that, oh, it's a perfect democracy and they've done well over 200 years, they've been practicing democracy, and that is the standard of democracy, and we have to look up to them and do as they do, we should understand now that it's not perfect. They are still working. So wherever you are, whatever society you are, if you're practicing democracy, know that it's a process. And so whatever you're going through, there shouldn't be despair. Shouldn't throw. Of course, there shouldn't be despair. Shouldn't give up. Just keep working at democracy. Keep voting. Keep involving in the political process, because you and I help to better our society. And just take this comment from Olivia Sanyu. She says, "Great job. I am learning." Thank you so much, Olivia, for your comment. Gentlemen, so we understand that, okay, Joe Biden is not going to have big issue running the country, but there's definitely the people on Trump's side who are going to make sure that day in, day out, they give him in my opinion, I think that they're going to be trying to oppose him day in, day out. We saw what happened to Obama with Trump actually going against him throughout his tenure. So are we expecting the same thing from the nationalists, patriots, the people that went on the rampage last week, Wednesday? Do we expect them to be around for a long time during, the entire time during Biden's, the entire Biden's administration? Let me put it that way. We're expecting them to keep coming back, every now and then. And how do you think the Biden administration is going to handle that, Ted?
This strand of American politics has been with us since the beginning. As John mentioned earlier, the battle lines that we have right now are really the same battle lines we've had historically in this country: federalism versus anti-federalism, large government versus small government, freedom versus equality, and particularly this race issue has been with us since the very beginning and continues to divide us very heavily. So these folks are not going anywhere. They have, hundreds of folks in the House representing them. They'll have 50 of them. Well, not quite 50, but a good chunk of them in the Senate. And I say not quite 50 because not all the Republicans in the Senate are of this ideology, this white nationalist ideology, this predatory capitalist ideology. And but there'll be a large group that'll still be here, and so we'll deal with them, and we will try to go forward. I don't think that we ever get to a kumbaya place, but Abraham Lincoln recognized that sometimes you have to use force to make peace, right? And the Civil War was a tragedy in this nation's history, but without it, we probably would still have slavery in this country. And so Lincoln used force through the federal government to bring us to a place where we were one nation, right? And so Joe Biden may have to do the same, and that is okay. And I hope that he does use the power of government to enforce the rule of law and to move us forward as one single country. But this idea of sedition and treason, and really this once again ideology of racial superiority and selfishness and that sort of thing is probably not going anywhere in this country, unfortunately.
Do you believe same, John?
Yeah, I do. Race is the number one problem in the United States. You can't really resolve other problems when there is so much racial tension. And it's white people who are oppressing black people. It's not a racial conflict. It is racial oppression. What's so disturbing about Trumpism is Trumpism really is white nationalism, white supremacy. That's what it is. It needs to be resoundingly defeated. What's very disturbing to me about the election is that 75 million people actually voted for Trump. So that is a sobering number. Now, with regards to these groups, such as the Proud Boys, the Boogaloos, whoever else they are, I don't even know who all they are, I would like the federal government to go after them in the same way that they went after organized crime. You could use the RICO laws You could destroy these groups, not the people, not the people, but you can destroy the groups by using RICO laws, by going after their tax structure, going after their finances. You could use the full force of the federal government to go after these white nationalist organ groups, and that's what they should do.
Do you think that Joe Biden is built to handle some of the things that you have alluded to?
Well, I don't think he has to, because he has a Justice Department that can do that. Joe Biden can reach across the aisle. Joe Biden can do everything he needs to do through the legislative branch. He can make peace with the other side. At the same time, the Justice Department under Garland Merrick can use the laws that are already in place and go after these violent. Let's not forget what they did. They violently invaded the state capitol. These are the same groups who were in Charlottesville, and if you let them go, they're going to be back equally as violent. Take them out. Use the laws. Go after them. Put them in prison. That's where they belong.
Bernard.
He has a lot of challenges, I mean, the U.S. as a foremost imperial power is in decline. So I think whatever goodies he's able to afford the American people would depend on how he negotiates, the international scene. Most of the money, a lot of the money comes from the international scene, from countries, outlying countries in the peripheries, where American multinational corporations now have to compete with European and Asian powers. So I think there he has some challenges. But then this is what we need to be forewarned, is there's a reason why a guy like Trump managed to become president. If that premise, right, is not challenged or an attempt is made to move away from it, then we stand a chance, because we have 75 million aggrieved people. We stand a chance of, if we are not lucky, getting a more competent Trump in the future. And that is scary, because Trump is not competent at using the white nationalist message. Hitler was competent.
Well, you mean Hitler? Okay.
Hitler was competent. Trump was incompetent. We don't want somebody who is competent to take hold of that message, right, and weaponize it against the people. That's why we need to be very careful.
Wow.
I couldn't agree more. I think that is what we have to watch out for, because that is our goal.
I'll let you respond to that by in your closing remarks, and I think we've got into that. It's 7:57 p.m. Central here in Chicago, and you've been listening to the Progressive Mind Show. Great discussion so far. I'll let my audience, my guests, close us at this moment, and we'll start with Ted, since you're already into it. Please help us understand why America is where we are. I mean, in a nutshell, you said a lot, but just close us where we were, and then the way forward, basically.
Yeah, I think Bernard hit it right on the head. I think both of the guests, Bernard talked about what is potentially coming. John talked about the prosecution needs to happen. And I don't feel the need to necessarily reiterate those things, because they said them very well. But I do believe that we should have hope, because we have seen dark days in this country and other countries around the world, and this is not the end. And so we keep fighting, and hopefully we'll see brighter days. So
there's hope for the future. This year will be a good year.
Good is relative, but we will make it through this year.
No, I want you to.
Good is relative. But 2020 was a good year in many ways.
Yeah.
So we will make it through.
I understand. No, thank you for that. Ben, your closing remarks, please, for today.
Well, there are a lot of good people in America, people who realize the contradiction, who realize what America is, the core of American problem right now, and they're working hard to change it. As much as Trump has a lot of followers, there are a lot more who are prepared to ward them off. So let's hope. But we need. I hope the current administration will move away from the kind of policies that gave opportunities for people like Trump to come in and try to destroy everybody.
Thank you so much. John, do you have, I know you are not a Democrat nor a Republican. As an independent, do you have trust in the Biden's administration to bring the economy back to its feet and get things moving? You can put that in your closing remarks.
Well, first off, let me just say I'm extraordinarily optimistic. I'm just an optimistic person.
Okay.
And even this insurrection that we just went through, to me, the good that came out of it is it's difficult to argue that Trumpism isn't what I said it was, white nationalist racism. It's hard to look at what happened and go, oh, they're just protesting. No, they're very violent. So I'm optimistic that people will have to make a decision. And I hope that they decide the right way. Some will, some won't. Science is flying in all areas of our lives, and science is good. And I mean, what's happening in the space program, what's happening in biology, science is, and that's probably what's scaring people by it. It's a very scary time because we're in a major time of change. It's almost like the Industrial Revolution. We are now in the information age, and it's scary. Globalization is scary. All this stuff is scary. Can't go back. We will go forward. And I'm very optimistic that we will not resolve our problems. We'll muddle along.
On that note, on that muddling along, I did like to thank my guest very much for giving us 2 hours of their precious time to come on the show to help contribute to the community building process. And Ted Williams III, my hats off your contribution, your immense contribution. As always, Attorney John Benson is a criminal defense lawyer, civil rights attorney. He also doubles in DCFS law. So look, if you have situations and you need a lawyer, he's been in this game for over 32 years to be specific. And and then you practice in Iran, or you lived in Iran?
I lived in Yemen. I spent a year in Africa. I've been to Rwanda, but I'm not going to enter your discussion.
So Tony Benson has a lot of experience in criminal defense law, in law in general. Definitely, if you have questions or have issues that you want to have someone to take a look at, contact us. I don't know if you can put this information. We can put it on here. But if not, how can people find you, Tony Benson?
Oh, I can give you my phone number.
Okay, just give it out. Just say it.
312-399-5419.
Excellent. And that goes his number. If you needed him, just call him. If you missed it, reach out to the
or look me up. I'm in the phone book. Look at the ARDC John Benson. You'll find me.
Excellent. Or you can always reach out to the Progressive Minds. We'll connect you.
Sure.
Ted Williams, very resourceful person. He's always available if you have any type of information or have questions regarding social science, civil rights issues, political science. He also is the producer and writer of 1619 Project, Ted?
1619, The Journey of a People. It's a 2-hour musical about the history of African Americans. So.
Yeah, it's on YouTube, Amazon. How can people find it?
Yeah, you can find it 1619musical.com, or you can go to tedwilliams3rd.com.
Excellent. Well, so yeah, there's so many resources people in our communities. Let's take advantage of these, and just want to thank my audience too. Well, okay, I think we're going to lose. I thought we lost Bernard. Bernard, great guy, very astute when it comes to political geopolitics and international affairs. We definitely will have Bernard here again. We had him when we talked about China colonizing Africa. Very interesting discussion. We're going to have him here again. Andrea Graham just joined us. She says a great discussion. Thank you, Andrea, for joining us. Now, our show has to come to an end. It's 4 minutes past 8 p.m. We are glad that you came You came our way to participate in this evening's discussion. We are very, very, very grateful. Remember to go on our website, theprogressivemindshow.com, to make your contribution, which helps us in carrying on with what we are doing and actually upgrading and getting better at what we do. It takes a lot to get these things coming your way. So please help support what we're doing. There's hope for the future. America is not going down. It's the home of the brave. Whatever situation, whatever roadblock or obstacle that has come this country's way, they have been able to overcome it. At least history shows us. But this doesn't mean that there isn't issues. It's still a work in progress. The democracy is a work in progress. There's still issues, and they're working on it. And so wherever you find yourself in this world, understand that, be it democracy or whatever your challenge is, keep working at it, and gradually you may not attain perfection, but you always get better. And so we are expecting that the Biden's administration will deal with whatever has been going on so far. And next week, his inauguration is going to be peaceful. Everything's going to run well. The country will be will progress and move ahead as we are expecting. Economy will get better. We are hoping and praying for all of these things. Immigration issues would get better. And we can look back after this to say that, look, it has been a good year and God has been with us. Until then, we shall definitely want to keep, we shall be keeping all of you in our prayers. Next week, Wednesday, from 6 to 8 p.m., Progressive Minds will be coming your way again. Remember, to whom much is given. Oh, actually, to all my audience. Sorry, I didn't forget about you. Thank you all for chiming in, for your comments, and for your support. I love you guys. Pastor Ate, thank you for your contribution. Johnny Woods as well, thank you for your contribution. I really appreciate it. Andrea Graham, thank you for your support and for keeping us on our toes and supporting us as you've always done. To the Progressive Minds team, I salute you. Once again, good evening. Remember, to whom much is given, much is required. This has been your host, Sena, aka Alinko. We shall be coming your way again. Ted and Tony Benson, God bless you guys.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
You're welcome. All right. Good night.
Minutes for today. Wash your hands clean and pray. Global epidemic day. Corona, people dying every day. Corona, it be virus. Mania, funny serious. Corona, a virus. A chewa, you go lost.
Purchase your track now.
Wash your hand daily with running water and don't stop. Keep away from non-farm meetings and do something, bro. Pray for your enemy, pray for your family, pray for your country, yeah. Don't forget to keep clean with hand sanitizer.
BENSON.
Pause a minute for today. Wash your hands clean and pray. Global epidemic day. Corona, people dying every day. Corona, it be virus. Mania, funny serious. Corona, a virus. A chewa, we go lost. China, Japan, man down. Italy, UK, man down. United States locked down. What now? Pause a minute for today. Wash your hands clean and pray. Global epidemic day. Corona, people dying every day. Corona, it be virus. Mania, funny serious. Corona, a virus, a chewa, we go lost. Pause a minute for today. Wash your hands clean and pray. Global epidemic day. Corona, people dying every day. Corona, it be virus. Mania, funny serious. Corona, a virus, a chewa, we go lost.